Shalom, everyone. I'm Ariella, and usually I start off with some technical information. I'd like to do something a little bit different tonight and start off by reading a few lines from Abraham Joshua Heschel. Refreshed and renewed, attired in festive garments, with candles nodding dreamily to unutterable expectations, to intuitions of eternity. Some of us are overcome with a feeling as if almost all they would say would be like a veil. There is not enough grandeur in our souls to be able to unravel in words the knot of time and eternity. One should like to sing for all men, for all generations. There is a song in the wind and joy in the trees. The Sabbath arrives in the world, scattering a song in the silence of the night. Eternity utters a day. Where are the words that could compete with such might? Thank you. I love that. I thought it was just so beautiful. I really wanted to start off with that instead of the way I usually do, which is saying shalom. There's a lot of you here tonight. I'm so happy to see you. And I am Ariella. We're having our Kabbalat Shabbat service tonight and starting off with the notorious 15-second lag. If you haven't signed in yet, would you please do so? You can sign in however you want to be called. And if you wind up coming in as a number and you'd rather have a name, just go back to the bottom of the screen and click on those horizontal lines. Jadelle, I see you. So glad you're here, Adele. Troy, hi. Who else is here? Augustine from New York City. Eliora from Halifax. Remind me to tell you a little story about Halifax every time I see that. Makes me happy. Eliel from Meridian, and I don't know where that is. I'm sorry. And as I say, there is a lag here, so please accept my apologies. If you type something in and I don't respond right away, it's because of the 15-second lag. And I do want to tell you that last week, the chat room lagged so much, I think I got completely cut off and didn't hear anybody. So I am so sorry about that. Mississippi, great state for somebody like me who has a lisp to have to say. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the way I start my Shabbat before we eat, and this is by Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. May it be God's will that I be privileged to receive this holy Shabbat with happiness and joy, with song and excitement. Protect me so that no sadness or depression, no anguish or worry will mar my Shabbat. May I be happy with all my soul, with all my heart, and with all my strength. Let this happiness without limit encompass the world, your people Israel, me, my loved ones, and the members of my household. Now, we know that Kabbalat Shabbat means reception of the Sabbath, and that's obviously what we're going to be doing tonight. It's the most important ritual observance that we have in Judaism, and the rabbinic institution of lighting the candles is what formally ushers in the Sabbath. We're supposed to have a minimum of 2, which signifies the remember and observe, which comes from the 4th of the 10 Commandments. These lights are only flickering flames, yet flames illumine our uncertain steps. Flames purify and renew, soften and refine. They brighten and make warm. Flames remind us of Sabbaths long past and of their beauty that delighted our hearts. May they inspire us to work for the great Sabbath of peace. And now the candle blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav, וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. ברוך אתה.
And you know that every week I like to pretend that we lit our candles, returned home before eating, after we went to shul. Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda in the Talmud says that we come home from shul with two angels, one good one and one bad one. Shalom Aleichem is a song that we sing around the Shabbat table that's purportedly based on the story, and this is one of my favorite melodies.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Yasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem LaShalom, Malachei Yashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni LeShalom, Malachei Yashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeirchem LaShalom, Malachei Yashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Lanny's going to do our Kiddush tonight, but before we start, I wonder if someone would be kind enough to type in that you can hear me, because the chat room hasn't moved and I'm very anxious that things may not be working properly. We've had a bit of a problem. I'd certainly appreciate it. Just type in anything. Well, not a curse word or anything. You know what I mean. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead. This is our Lanny Greenberg. He's going to do our Kiddush tonight, and a traditional Shabbat Kiddush includes reading a section of the creation story from Genesis, a blessing over the wine, which we're going to do in a moment, and a blessing over Shabbat itself. And as you know, you're good. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. So let's start with Lanny.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, borei pori hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit. Ki hu yom techila lamikra'e kodesh, zecher l'siyat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu v'achata v'yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava uvratzon Hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat Amen. Shabbat Shalom, my friends.
Welcome guest 414. I'm so pleased that you're here. I can see everybody's welcoming you. We always love to have new ones come, if you will. Didn't Lanny do a great job? He doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to try and talk him into doing something for us here at OneShul. We're going to go ahead and move on now to the hand washing. This is another way, and again, it's a rabbinic ordinance. It started out that it was only decreed originally for the priests before they ate their sacred food. Eventually, however, it was extended to all of us. And here is the hand washing blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim.
And Troy, I'm going to quote you on that when I contact Lanny, so be ready in case he contacts you. Let's see. Challah. This is the last ritual before we get to eat, before we start our Shabbat meal. And even though it doesn't show it here, we know that the bread is supposed to be covered both top and bottom, the knife as well as the bread. We raise the uncut loaves, and then we say the blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lahem min haaretz. Amen.
I wanted to play Hine Matov here. It's the first verse from Psalm 133. And as I say every week, and I really, truly mean it, it's my way of expressing how happy I am that you came tonight and that we're together. And unfortunately, some of the music stuff on the bottom covers up the words, which is how good and pleasant is it when brothers dwell together in unity. And this is just going to be a repetition of that. So let's the pictures in this are absolutely beautiful, so let's take a look at it.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, מה טוב ומה נעים. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב.
Adele, I'm glad you asked about Lanny. I don't think he'll mind me telling you that he'll only be with us every other Friday. He actually has found a synagogue that has a rabbi that he really enjoys, so he's only going to be with us every other week. And of course, last time I was here was the week that he couldn't be here, and vice versa. As you know, usually during a Kabbalat Shabbat service, there's a lot of psalms that are read. Tonight we're only going to do one, and unfortunately I didn't have too much time to practice this, but if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and give this a stab in Hebrew. Adonai malach tegel ha'aretz yismahu yim rabim. Anan va'arafel sevivav tzedek u'mishpat michon kiso. Esh lefanav telech utelehet saviv sarav. Heiru v'rakav tevel ra'atav v'tegel ha'aretz. Harem kadonag namasu milifnei Adonai milifnei Adon kol ha'aretz. I'm so slow that I think you can probably tell where the ends of the sentences are if you don't read Hebrew. Hagidu Hashemayim Sidko, Vedu Chol Ha'amim Kvodo, Yevoshu Kol Ovdei Fesel, Hamit Ha'alim Ba'alalim, Hishtahavu Lo Kol Elohim, Shama'a Vatismak Sion, Vatagelna Benot Yehuda Lama'an Mispatecha Adonai. Ki ata Adonai Elyon al kol ha'aretz meod na'aleta al kol Elohim. Ohave Adonai sinura shomer nafshot chasidav miyad Hashaim yatzalem. Ozaru ala tzadik ulishrei lev simcha. Simchu tzakim ba'Adonai vehodu lezecher kodsho. Now, recall that what we're doing is Kabbalat Shabbat, which means reception of the Sabbath. And I love the story about Rabbis Hanina and Yanai, who stood out in their yards. One said, "Let us go forth and meet the Queen of Shabbat." And the other one said, "Come, O bride, come, O bride." So I'd like us to read this together. I love this. The sun has already disappeared beyond the treetops. Come, let us go and welcome the Sabbath Queen. She is already descending among us, holy and blessed, and with her are angels, a host of peace and rest. Come, O Queen, peace be unto you, O angels of peace. Sit among us, O pure Shabbat Queen, and enlighten us with your splendor. Tonight and tomorrow, then you may pass on. And we, for our part, will honor you by wearing beautiful clothing, by singing Zemarot, by praying, and by eating 3 meals, and with complete rest, and with pleasant rest. Bless me with peace, O angels of peace. Thank you, Augustine. That's very kind. Can I pretend you said that about my Hebrew? You know, my favorite line in this, I know it sounds silly. Tonight and tomorrow, then you may pass on. And I don't know why. I love that line so much. From the stories that we just talked about Rabbi Hanina and Yanai, those stories served as the basis for the Lachadodi hymn, which we're going to listen to now. You see the first line here is in Hebrew. That's the refrain, and you're going to hear that multiple times. I wrote the rest of it in English so that it might not be too difficult to follow, particularly for me. Here's Lachadodi.
לקראת כלה, בני שבת לקבלה. להדודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת לקבלה. להדודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת לקבלה. להדודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ותפארת לתהילה. להדודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת שבת מקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי הלאה בואי הלאה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת מקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת מקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת מקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת מקבלה
The Shema, which means hear, is a declaration of faith in one God, and it's considered to be our most important prayer. We're obligated to say it twice daily, in the morning and at night. And perhaps I shouldn't, but before I ever say the Shema, I always think of Rabbi Akiva, who was reciting the Shema while his skin was being scraped off with that large iron comb as punishment by the Romans because he was teaching Torah. Jewish law requires that we concentrate more on the first verse, and so that's what we're going to be listening to tonight, the first and main paragraph of the Shema. Let's say it together. And then I'd like us to listen to the first part of it, sung in Hebrew. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall speak of them when you are sitting at home, and when you go on a journey, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be jewels between your eyes. You shall inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto
Mi Chamoka is based on the Song of the Sea poem from Exodus 15. It answers the question, who is like you, Lord? The answer, of course, is that there is none like him. This is Mi Chamoka.
צומחת נהדר בקודש.
The Hatzi Kaddish, or half Kaddish, is sometimes called the Reader's Kaddish because it's usually used as a separator between parts of a service. It's a hymn of praise about the greatness of God, and since we're going to, in a moment, be moving on to the interactive part of our evening, I thought that this would be an appropriate place for us to listen to this. The Hatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא תברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דרכו בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו אלא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן ואמרו אמן.
Good question, Adele. I'll look at it again and get back to you. You know, this came from a Hebrew website. There's got to be some explanation. And if not, guess what I'll be changing. Thank you. This is Debbie Friedman, and she's going to do for us the prayer for healing. It's very pretty. I'm going to play it, and I'm going to try to talk over the music so that I'd like you to just go ahead and type in anyone that you think is in need of physical or spiritual healing, compassion, restoration, or strength, and remember that you can type in your own name. And I'm going to start by saying I hope my friend Terry is not having too rough of a time with her chemo this week. Just go ahead and type in your names. Melissa Rivers. I'm glad you put that in, guest 414, because when we got up to the part about did anything make me sad this week, Joan Rivers' death did. Deanne Gonsalves. Adele, your son-in-law Luke. As you look back over the past week, think about any blessings, anything that you're grateful for, And actually, along the same vein, anything that's made you happy this week. I'm going to go ahead and start by, you know, about my dog Casey, who had his eye removed a week and a half ago. He's healing wonderfully well, and I'm so happy. And the other thing that made me happy this week was I got to video Skype with one of our regular members. And so I got to meet him in person, if you will, and it was just terrific. So, any blessings, anything that's made you happy, anything you're grateful for that's happened over the past week? Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Adele. Anybody have a blessing this week? Anything that's made you happy? The car window open. It stormed, but I left the car window open. It stormed, but the thermal blanket on the seat mostly saved the car. Adele, that's terrific. And one reason I adore you, Adele, is because you are appreciative of what to others, and certainly not to me, may seem like very small things. I think you're very astute and everything touches you in one way or another. Augustine, my business is picking up just when I thought I wouldn't be able to keep my apartment. Good news, Augustine. Do I get to be nosy and ask what business you're in? I'm going to move on to this next one, and if you'd like to answer, I will see it and comment. But again, I'm really happy. So let's get the converse of being happy. Was there anything that made you sad this week? Anything that bothered you, that worried you? And as you've probably already noticed, the OneShul group here is quite empathic. So I'm always comfortable sharing, even if it's very personal. And tonight it's not very personal, but I am sad about Joan Rivers passing. You train dogs. Oh, I can't tell you how wonderful I think that is. You hear that I'm so bad talking about my dog all the time. God and my dog at the center of my universe. Anything made you sad or worried you, or something on your mind, something that's bothering you that you'd like to share with us? Sometimes it's nice just to say it out loud in a safe environment. So much horror in the world I cannot even imagine. I cannot even begin to enumerate. Boy, are you right, Adele, and it gets worse every day, doesn't it? Sometimes it's hard just to even listen to the news, and I get, actually, when we're talking all over the world, that's true, but I also get 3 Jewish newspapers, and it's sometimes very hard to read those as well. It's about to be 2 months since my mother's passing, and it's life-changing. Augustine, I'm so sorry. I'm actually trying not to tear up here. And guess 414, along those lines, let's lift up the families of the journalists who were murdered by ISIS in prayer. Piece of good news to share. Skyped with my grandkids in London on Thursday. Let me go back to Augustine. 2 months. It's still hard, isn't it? I know my head is tilted. It's because I have a separate screen up here so that I can read your comments. One thing I did want to do tonight is to remind you, last time I was with you, we were at the beginning of the month of Elul, which was the start of our 40 days of Teshuvah, the 40 days before we started our 10 days of awe. And today is the 10th of Elul, right? So we're 10 days into that 40 days. So I wanted to remind everybody, as if you needed reminding, right, that we are still in the period of time where we need to do some self-introspection. And I'm going to stop here for just a second. Every day is hard, but I try to bring her lessons with me everywhere. I can tell you we're real close to her. Eh? Yes. I'm glad you had her, and I'm so sorry you've lost her. But it sounds like you're still carrying her around with you everywhere, and that's wonderful. I love to hear that. So we're talking about return and repentance, if I can get my head back into this because my heart's hurting for Augustine. I'd like to just read something from the very old Gates of Prayer. Holy and awesome God, we stand in your presence, filled with regret for our many sins and failings. Though there is greatness in us and a deep longing for goodness, we've often denied our better selves and refused to hear your voice within us, calling us to rise to the full height of our humanity. For there is weakness in us as well as strength. At times we choose to walk in darkness, our vision obscured. We do not care to look within, and we are unwilling to look beyond at those who need our help. O God, we are too weak to walk unaided. Be with us as a strong and wise friend, and teach us to walk by the light of your truth. Thank you for letting me read that with you. Now, before we have our conversation, and I'm thrilled to say that since you've been participating with me tonight, that tonight I really need participation because we're going to be talking about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and the more I read, the more I want somebody to talk with about it. We're going to conclude the final prayer that's said at all 3 daily services. This is the Elenu. Now, as usual, I have run over, but let me say I'm going to be presumptuous and speak for all of us that are here tonight. You are most welcome, Augustine, and thank you very much, and really appreciate you sharing. I'm going to move through the beginning part of our discussion tonight pretty quickly because I'd like to move on to the meat of the matter, which comes toward the end. And again, my apologies. If you feel the need to leave before we're done, I will certainly understand and I won't be insulted because it's my fault that I'm running over. So let's just go quickly, setting the stage. A little, have you been blowing? Adele, do you believe that I just got mine delivered today? It's one of the ones that's supposed to not have any odor and it's supposed to be kosher and everything else, and I got along with it a book of how to do it. I have seen a picture of you before with that great big humongous long one, and I wasn't even going to attempt this. This one only has a quarter turn. And no, I haven't started it yet. A little bit of history. So we remember that the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians at about 586 BCE, and about 50 years later, under King Cyrus, Babylon fell to Persia. We had the wave run return, and that was Zerubbabel and Joshua. King Cyrus let the Israelites return to Jerusalem. I'll let you know how it goes. I may call you for some advice, Adele, if you don't mind. I have a feeling I'm not going to be real coordinated with it. So King Cyrus let them come back to Jerusalem, and he had a reason for doing this. One of the things, and I'll go ahead and mention it here, is that for some reason the Persians had a proclivity. They wanted to keep their ethnic groups stable so that they could pick them up and move them around to different parts of their territories because it was so large. And they found that if they kept their ethnic groups stable and cohesive, that they were more likely to do a better job and stick around and do an excellent job restoring whatever areas needed to be developed. Now, what happened was that they started rebuilding the altar and the foundation of the new temple, but the returnees, the Israelites who came back, refused the help of the locals. And if you read 2 Kings, verse 17, it gives a very nice description about the Samaritans. When the leftovers from the northern kingdom after the Assyrians wiped them out, the ones that were left, those descendants, started mixing with the ones in the southern kingdom of Judah, which is where the returnees are coming back to. All the intermarriage, etc., caused a big problem. The Samaritans let the locals, the dregs of society, they were called, that they were impure. They actually went and built their own temple, and they offered to help build the temple, but the returnees thought that they were so impure and so horrible, they turned them down. So what happened? Well, the locals decided that they were really irritated. They wrote a letter to the king, and the king halted the building of the temple for a little while. So now we move on to wave 2 return, which is almost a century later. And you all know about Ezra, but I thought one of the important things to put here, just in case you don't know too much, is how highly he was regarded, called Ezra the scribe. And this is in the Talmud Bavli and the Sanhedrin 21b. Had Moses not preceded him, Ezra would have been worthy of receiving the Torah for Israel. He was sent to Jerusalem by the Persian king to teach Torah and rule by the law of God. He was given unprecedented room to rule. He was allowed to hire all the judges and do whatever he wants. He could even administer death penalties if he so chose. But when he came back, after this 100 years later, after there had been all this mixing between the northern and southern kingdoms, he mourned. And we'll talk in a moment about why he mourned. But I wanted to stick in here that there was a wave 3 return, Nehemiah. He came 13 years after Ezra, and he was the one who rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem in 52 days. Jerusalem itself was already on the go with respect to being built, but and remember that the Samaritans were still kind of hanging around and being very threatening. So Nehemiah actually got it built in 52 days. He was sent there. He requested to go and rebuild the wall, and he was the cupbearer to the king. He was very well trusted. So what did Ezra find that was so terrible? The Sabbath was defiled. The Sabbath, apparently they found some loopholes and actually made the Sabbath the market day. So anybody that was even in a surrounding area came on the Sabbath to do their shopping. Intermarriage was the most horrendous thing that he found, and we'll get into that in just a moment. And the children's language, they didn't even know the Judean dialect. There had been so much. Ezra wanted to get rid of all, not by telling people, right, we're going to get to that, Adele, in just a minute. So I'm sure Adele knows absolutely more probably than I do. So pay attention to her notes as we're going along here. So these are just three of the things that Ezra found. The intermarriage he considered to be the most horrendous thing. So he issued a proclamation in order to assemble. He called all the men to assemble within 3 days, or they were going to have their property confiscated, and they were going to be excluded from the congregation. This is what he said there. You have trespassed by bringing home foreign women, thus aggravating the guilt of Israel. So now make confession to the Lord, God of your fathers, and do his will, and separate yourselves from the people of the land and from the foreign women. That's in Ezra 10, 9 through 11. 10 days later, the judging began, and 3 months after that, all the foreign wives and their children were banished. Just, don't even bother divorcing them. Just throw them out. Just get rid of them, which in that day and age, if you recall, is going to be tantamount to a death penalty. So intermarriage was the biggest no-no. We do have intermarriage Torah prohibitions in Exodus 34, 11 through 16. We have a long listing of who's not supposed to get married. You're not supposed to give your daughters to the sons or the sons to the daughters. We have Amorites, Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And in Deuteronomy 7, verse 7, chapter 7, verse 3 to 4, the Girgashites are added to this. That's very explicit. You are not to intermarry with them. Now, I'd like to mind you that later on in Deuteronomy 23, it says that the Edomites and the Egyptians are okay to intermarry with. Now, also moral impurity. In Leviticus 18, this is a long passage, and it talks about one kind of moral impurity, and it has to do with saying, none of you shall come near anyone of his own flesh and uncovered nakedness. And it's a long list of someone that they might be related to in some way, shape, or form. And then Ezra in 9:11, being more explicit about this particular case, the land you are about to possess is unclean because of the unclean people, abhorrent practices. You're not supposed to marry them, and you're not supposed to do anything for their well-being or their advantage. Pretty sad state of affairs, but that's the ruling. Now, after the Jewish community was relocated to Jerusalem, there were some initial things that we've already mentioned. The temple was rebuilt, and this was all to reestablish the Jewish culture. Ezra engaged in public Torah readings. He taught the rules and laws of Torah, and Sabbath observance was strongly enforced. So why was intermarriage of primary concern? Well, remember, there was nearly a century of the returnees who married pagan or non-Hebrew women. Everyone felt that they needed a culturally and religiously cohesive, unified Jewish community. Remember, this is Ezra coming in and seeing all these horrendous things going on, particularly the intermarriage, which bothered him the most. Assimilation was considered a threat to the Jewish communal survival, actually risking the disappearance of the Jewish people. What was needed was a common Jewish identity, and what was the solution to accomplish that? Ethnic purity. And where have we heard that before? So how did they ensure that this edict was accepted? The edict of, okay, guys, you have to get rid of your foreign wives, and not only that, you have to get rid of the children by them. So we're talking generations of people that were banished from the land. One of the strategies was to string together unrelated Bible passages. They were never meant to be read separately, but they were meant to be read separately, but he strung them together to make them sound really bad. And they were afraid of the punishment of God, including complete extinction of all of them. They were also afraid that they were going to be banished from the temple and from the community. So these were the strategies to make sure that they obeyed. These are just some of the words that are used, and this is from the JPS Oxford version, and some of the other versions of the Tanakh are much worse. Foreign women are unclean, abhorrent practices, abominations, desacralizing the holy seed by intermingling with foreigners, and polluting the priestly lineage. So let's talk about Ezra. So for Ezra, who was a Jew, ethnicity alone was a determinant, not what you believed or how you behaved. You could be the most God-fearing, God-loving, worshiping God person in the world. You could read Torah all day long. You could keep all of God's laws, and it wouldn't matter. Ethnicity alone was a determinant. And the bad thing was that during that time, there wasn't a method of conversion. And about this time, and there is some speculation about whether or not it occurred during the time of Ezra, occurred a little bit later under Roman rule. Must Jeff friends need an ear? Thank you. Please come back, Augustine, and I will be thinking about you all week. In the Talmud, this is when matrilineality was established. Now, before Ezra, it was all patrilineality. So what does this mean for us today? The matrilineality and patrilineality, which we'll get to in just a second. So intermarriage today, this is been thinking a lot about this, about the what's going on with all the different movements and how they have different methods of conversion and how they accept and define who is a Jew and who is a non-Jew. So who do you even ask these days? Who's a Jew and who's a non-Jew? If you ask a person if they're a Jew or a non-Jew, you'll probably get a different answer if you ask someone in their congregation or their rabbi or someone else in their family, perhaps. So intermarriage today is between a Jew and a non-Jew. And a convert and a Jew by birth is not considered intermarriage, or is it? Apparently, and this kind of surprised me, although it shouldn't have, in the conservative, let's not even talk about Orthodox at the moment, but we're going to focus on the four major movements: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist. But for right now, let's talk about the conservative. Our religious identity is supposed to supersede our mere ethnicity, but with respect to a convert and a Jew by birth not being intermarriage, well, guess what? It is considered intermarriage, apparently. As you probably know, the conservative rabbis are not permitted to perform intermarriages. That's between a Jew and a non-Jew. And a convert, unless they have been converted by conservative standards, in other words, if they were converted in the Reform or Reconstructionist religion, because they consider halakha binding, although it is mutable, they consider it binding, that convert to them for purposes of intermarriage, they are not considered a Jew. So theoretically, and I actually did anonymously, of course, called 3 conservative rabbis in the state of Florida. I got to admit, it wasn't a real great sample, but none of them said that they would perform a marriage between someone who wasn't converted in a conservative fashion, that they were not allowed to do it. And what happens to them if they perform an intermarriage? When they're not allowed to, they get thrown out of their rabbinical association. So, as I say, the religious identity today supersedes the mere ethnicity. Adele, still like Isaiah's view. The person wanted to keep the Sabbath and that we should embrace them as part of the community. Yes, I certainly believe that. And I'm almost on the verge of saying you're a Jew if you say you're a Jew and your self-identity is as a Jew. This whole thing is so messy. I'm really going to be interested to hear when we get to specific questions what all of you think and have to say, and I still haven't reached any conclusions myself. But the matrilineal versus patrilineal descent, it does vary by movement, as you know, and the Reform and the Reconstructionist they're bilineal, if you will. You can have the mother or the father if the person was brought up Jewish, and if not, then they still have to make a public declaration. And there are recommendations regarding what else you should be doing in the Reform and Reconstructionists, but it does not necessarily have to be an immersion, and it definitely does not have to be the circumcision or the Hadafat Dam Brit for men. So that's the Reform and Reconstructionist. The conservative and the Orthodox both consider halakha binding, so they both require immersion, preferably in a mikveh, and circumcision, and a bet din, and a course of study. And the interesting thing here is that even though the rituals and the labels for it are the same, in the Orthodox, let's say that you did everything, but there was not an Orthodox rabbi or an Orthodox layperson on your bet din. Unless there was your conversion was supervised by someone in the Orthodoxy, even if the ritual itself was the same, if it wasn't overseen by them, you would not be considered to be converted in terms of Orthodoxy. The conservatives, as you know, they consider you do have to go through all of it, but so you can't move necessarily from conservative to Orthodox. It's almost impossible. And Reform and Reconstructionists, you can move to conservative, but you can't marry. You could probably attend their synagogue, but I think that probably comes as a nasty surprise to some people. You know, I think to a lot, and having talked to a couple of couples who had been in similar situations, that they were very surprised that, you know, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. One was a convert, one was a Jew by birth. They wanted to join their the husband's conservative synagogue, and they couldn't even get that rabbi to marry them. Now, one of the interesting thing was, and although there's probably only 50 or 100,000 in the world, the Karaites don't believe, remember the Talmud is where the matrilineal descent comes from. Prior to that, it was descent, yes, it was patrilineal descent. So since the Karaites don't believe in the Talmud, they only use the Torah, obviously they are the ones, they still adhere only to patrilineal descent. So I wanted to just for a moment here mention about Israel, which I thought was very interesting. Guess 414. I thought matrilineal was because anyone could witness a mother of the baby at birth. Similar proof isn't available for the father. Actually, that's probably one of the reasons. And in reading why, part of what Ezra did is because they didn't have DNA tests, if you will, and it was easier to prove. But that is not the primary reason. But thank you for bringing that up. That's what I thought too. Yes, in view of Holocaust, I've been there, done that. Thank you, Adele. Keep talking. in Israel, I wanted to mention the special circumstance. If you go to Israel and your mother was a Jew, there won't be any questions asked. You can go there under the right of return laws, and as you know, that's patrilineal or matrilineal or grandparents or whatever. You will have all the advantages of the right of return. However, your government documents will list you as a non-Jew if you were patrilineal descendant, and you can't marry a Jew in the state of Israel, and you can't be buried in a Jewish ceremony. I thought all that was very interesting. So let's get to some meaty questions here. I had dozens of long conversations with Orthodox, and they publicly state that conservatives do not practice original Judaism. I think that you'll find that that, for the most part, is extremely true. And what's interesting is that the Pew Research study showed that those who were in, or actually Orthodox didn't change too much, but if there was going to be a shift from one movement to another, that the conservatives were more likely to shift to Reform or Reconstructionist. In other words, to the less, it's based on much more than observance, but the comment you made has to do with observance, so I'll just put it that way. Shift downwards, if you will. The Orthodox do reject Jews who are not exactly like them. Bigotry is an equal opportunity vice. Boy, isn't that the truth. And they do keep to themselves pretty much. And I have absolutely nothing against Orthodoxy. I think it's wonderful. And if they choose to live that way, I think it's wonderful. Do not practice original Judaism. And I like the way that you're using the word original. And Adele, we need to talk about you coming in perhaps and actually giving a talk on that, because I think I know what you are referring to, and I think we would all like to avail ourselves of that knowledge. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Adele is a rabbi at Beit Torah. That is it, isn't it, Adele? In Arizona, if memory serves. So let's move back here to were Ezra's actions justifiable? Meaning the banishment of the wives and the wives' children, even if they were from the Jewish husband. Yes, yes, and okay. Goody. I hope you're responding to okay about me getting in touch with you and you coming in and drawing that distinction for us. As I said, we'd all like to avail ourselves of your knowledge. Somebody help me out here. Were Ezra's actions justifiable? Was that what you were answering to? Yes, yes, and okay? I guess when we answered, part of the answer to that question is going to be, obviously it wouldn't be acceptable today, but the actions in terms of the time and the place and the purpose, what was supposed to be accomplished, were Ezra's actions justifiable? The banishment, which is essentially a death sentence for the foreign wives and their children. Think so. Adele thinks so. What does anybody else think? Was Ezra justified in throwing out all those folks? Well, let's move on to the next question. Let's say that he did not banish them, and the intermarriage and the assimilation, as opposed to acculturation. Assimilation means that you lose all your characteristics, if you will. You lose your culture, you lose your heritage, if you will. You more or less become as one, not as two separate entities. Would Judaism exist today? In any form? Nobody can second guess Ezra. Good answer. So if Ezra didn't banish the folks, would Judaism exist today? I guess another way of asking the question would be, if the bloodline, if you will, was diluted, if you will, because that's essentially what it says in the Bible, would Judaism exist as it is? Would Judaism exist today? Adele, you're absolutely right. And one of the most fascinating things, and that I have, still a problem with because I'm having to learn two different things, is the differences in their liturgy and some of their not only levels of practice, but types of practice, when they practice it, etc. So I'm still working on that. So, who is a Jew today for us? Scroll down just a little bit for me. I think we put too much importance on isms and not Hashem. Good answer. Most of the studies I've read recently say that the grandchildren of intermarried Jewish, non-Jewish persons are usually not practicing any Judaism. So if Ezra had not acted as he did, Judaism probably would not have survived. That's really interesting from those studies, the grandchildren of intermarried Jewish and non-Jewish persons. The Pew Research study, I'm not quite sure that it goes as far back to the grandparents, but it does address this issue. First of all, I'm sure you all know that the intermarriage rate is climbing, but it depends on a lot of different factors regarding whether or not the children will be choose to be Jewish or not. And sometimes it's a matter of their choice, despite the fact that if you can find someone who will marry a Jew and a non-Jew, that they usually put a lot of restrictions on it, and one of them is that you raise your children to be Jews. And actually that's a stipulation for conversion of someone who is a non-Jew in any kind of conversion. You need to promise that you will raise your children Jewishly. If anybody bothered to look, you would note that Jews in different areas of the world tend to look like the local sort of intermarriage and conversion. Dump Ezra. Love it, Adele. The majority does not make anything right. That's a great answer. I'm going to have to mull that one over. Thank you. I love this. I hope there's some way that I can go back and look at these answers. Biblical Judaism is not a democracy. Very true. And that's particularly pertinent to this discussion. Segment that will stay with the religion, even with assimilation, which occurs in relatively peaceful times repeatedly. And yes, it does. So I think all of you are giving great answers, but the who is a Jew, I guess it depends on who you ask, what movement you look at, or whatever. And I personally, if you think you're a Jew and you've got, and you behave as a Jew, you're a Jew. Biblical Judaism possible as we no longer have tribes. Good point. So I'm going to reiterate again, I'm going to be hounding you to come and talk with us, Adele. So be ready. So who is a Jew? Again, I say it depends on, if you ask someone who is in a particular movement, they'll probably give you the standard book answer. And I just find it very interesting that a lot of who is a Jew answer today is contingent upon what particular movement you adhere to. Personally, I go by If I'm going to be killed for being a Jew, I am a Jew. Wow. That's wonderful. Where did you come from? Were you guest 414? Or did you just sign in and I missed you? It's the capacity to adapt to new circumstances and hence survive. So, Adele, would your answer then be to, would Judaism exist today? It would be yes, maybe not in the same form, but it would exist. Of only Levites and the rest, not tribes. Me, I'm a convert. Just signed in. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it, despite the fact that you just signed in. And we're probably not going to be here too much longer. You're certainly going in and out with a bang. That was great. Rambam's 13 Principles of Judaism. These are all fabulous. And, you know, I just can't thank you enough because you really get me thinking. You can tell that I'm wrestling with this. And sometimes, you know, I have a tendency actually to get a little bit angry. And my tolerance of ambiguity is very, very high, having worked on a couple of doctorates, believe me, that it is high, but sometimes this just gets me a little distressed. Just realized what time it was. Well, perfect timing. You came in and made a wonderful comment. Try to get here when I can for Kabbalat Shabbat. Tribal setup will be reinstated with the temple. Terrific. Well, I am thrilled with all of you, and I have kept you so long, I'm feeling very guilty. Ariella, yes, lost tribes, remnants still cling to being different in part due to discrimination. We need to chat, and I'm going to, for the 10th time, tell you I'm going to be torturing you, Adele. I know you have your own group of congregants, but too bad. We need to borrow you. So one last question that I wanted. I'm so happy you all were still here. Thank you. No, thank you. And yes, we're here because I'm a pig with other people's time, obviously, for which I apologize. But I'm telling you, they're staying here to help me out because I've been wrestling with this, as you can probably tell. One thing I wanted to ask you, especially since one of you said that you were a convert. Let's say that you had the option that you didn't know too much about Judaism, and lots of people who go to convert do not read very, very deeply and don't have a full grasp of what the differences are among the different movements, all of which offer conversions in one form or another. What do you think about deciding before you converting which movement you're going to be in? Oh, that was you. I had a feeling it was you, Diane, but so let's pretend, I don't know how long ago it was, but let's pretend, you know that I love to, well, you weren't here earlier. I love to pretend that if you didn't know a whole lot about the different movements and you were going to convert, would you make a decision to do the one that required the least in terms of immersion? Okay, I think we're all women here, so that may be a bad question to ask because circumcision, you know, if we were guys, we may have a different perspective on that. But what do you think about learning more about the different movements before you make a decision? In other words, let's say that you decide that you wanted to have a reform or a reconstructionist conversion, but then later on in life you decide that you really would prefer to be conservative and that you had to do some different things. And at this point, I don't even know if it's adding on something different or what. I think probably convert Orthodox just to make sure. Interesting. And yeah, if you go conservative, you can be reform or reconstructionist, but the likelihood of being Orthodox is practically nil anyway. So that would be the only one that you probably couldn't go to. You can still convert on top of conversion if you fret. Good. Zena, it's ridiculous. But I had read, so don't go that away. I had a feeling you did. That's why I said, let's pretend. I knew that I was pretending, but I just wanted to ask. And you did address a question for me anyway, and I appreciate that. I think in my case, I would probably, just because I would probably already know that I was not going to adhere to orthodoxy, that conservative would have been the route that I would have gone. This is great. Well, I'm so glad you came in. Thank you. And oh my goodness, it's 9:30. I'm feeling so bad and so guilty. I'm going to move on, but do me a favor, Orthodoxy, and always will. I have a feeling that you are absolutely correct, and I was very surprised to read about the government documents reading Not a Jew and the burial and the marriage. I'm going to go ahead and close this out, but do me a favor. To make it, even though I don't need to, just for Rosh Chodesh. No, you don't need to, but there are a lot of people who actually get so much spiritual renewal from that. I personally don't feel that way, but that's me personally. But boy, I'll tell you, some of my friends, they are just dedicated, and fortunately we have several around here that are not too expensive, and they're always booked. That's why Rosh Chodesh, yes, and that's primarily, that's the day we women get to have our extra day off a month, because we didn't, supposedly, because we didn't give our gold earrings to Aaron when he was building the golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai. So I am going to stop here and tell you that we'd love to have you present a class, lead a service, write an article, or make a video. Revisiting anything, a renewed Sanhedrin will make that call. Wow, a renewed Sanhedrin. Isn't that interesting? I'll have to mull that one over. But thank you for that comment. And can you write that down for me? I have my associate here with me, helping me so that I can actually look at your comments as it goes along. The donate button is at the top of your page. $5, $1, 50 cents, whatever you give is what, more than we had before. And I did want to tell you that on Friday, the 19th, Ketzira is doing the Kabbalat Shabbat, and on the 20th, we're coming into the high holidays, and Wednesday is Erev Rosh Hashanah. Ketzira is doing that. And day one, do me a favor and please come. I'm doing a Tashlik service, which I have never done before, and I've been studying like a wild woman. So bring your breadcrumbs and your bucket of water to the computer, and we'll all do it together, and we'll learn together. And I would appreciate you muchly being here. And yes, Ketzira is wonderful. On day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, we have Kabbalat Shabbat that evening, and then of course we have Kol Nidre, which isn't on the schedule yet, on October 3rd, Friday, and on Yom Kippur I'm doing Yizkor, and Ketzira is doing Nila, both on Saturday on Yom Kippur. Let's see, I'm going to put up my email here. Please email me, let me know if you have any ideas. Anything you'd like me to add or subtract or not do during the service itself, anything that you'd like to see. The hardest thing for me is, although I must admit I love the studying, is preparing something for a discussion, because nobody ever tells me what they want to talk about. Although y'all are a very special group tonight, I do need to tell you, I've never had such interaction and learned so much all in such a short period of time. And I guess I shouldn't say short period of time because I've already kept you half an hour over. Not only is my Shabbat more special when you're here, but particularly tonight, since this is a subject that is of much interest to me. I appreciate you sharing in your comments. As I say, I've learned a lot and got a chance to look at other people's perspective, because this is something that I don't usually discuss with people because sometimes they get very distressed. Most Orthodox rabbis that I've taught would normally disagree with every view you have posted, Adele. I'm not trying to be mean, but that has been my experience. I love it, and I know you're not trying to be mean, but this is a kind of conversation that we need to have. And can you give one concrete example? I probably have far greater breadth of experience both in time and geography. Well, I don't need to intervene between the two of you, because obviously you two can handle yourselves just perfectly fine. So I'm going to sit here and shut up and let you two converse. But again, in answer to your question, am I on Facebook? No, I'm not on Facebook. But there is my email address, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. As you know, I am associated with Darshan Yeshiva. I am a volunteer there. Volunteer whenever and wherever I can. And we would love to have all of you volunteer as well. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And all of you can still stay in the chat room. I need to apologize to you again for taking up so much of your time, but boy, you have no idea how grateful I am, and you've made my night, and I just really can't thank you enough. And I will be probably, let's see, I'm not going to be back to you until the Tashlich service on the 25th. So I hope to see you then, and thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom. And as I say, you can stay in the chat room and continue your discussion. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.